There is a little recognized Senate hearing going on in the United States. It didn't get a lot of headlines, probably should have, because the U.S. commander of the U.S. European Command, General Chris Cavoli, was asked a number of questions about the war going on between Russia and Ukraine and some of the American associations with it. Okay, so the U.S. has been helping the Ukraine side for all this time. We've had troops on the ground, especially the leader level inside Ukraine, working hand in glove with the Ukrainian side. How is this done? How does this work out for the United States? Have we improved ourselves?
We've learned a lot about institutional adaptation from watching both sides as well.
If we or our NATO allies had to face Russia ourselves in a conflict, because of what we learned, would we be exponentially better off today because of the lessons we've learned in the last 2.5 years?
Oh, yes, Chairman.
That's one of the things that worries me the most about anything General Cavoli said today. I hope that he's just saying that to placate his political masters on the Hill or his seniors in uniform, because he can't say anything different. I hope that's the case, and I hope it's not that he actually believes that. You see, though, that the senator does. Are we exponentially better off? Not just have we improved some because we've seen this happen, but are we exponentially better off? He said, oh, yes, Senator. And obviously, the senator already believed that. And after hearing this, he's probably even more convinced. So he'll probably stop looking, probably won't pay attention to it. But I can just tell you, the likelihood is that he is completely wrong. Now, I haven't been in active duty since 2015. So it's been, there's a solid decade there where I've been out. All I can do is rely on what people have told me. But I also have actually parts of 3 decades experience before this in uniform to be able to tell me enough that the people that are in charge now are categorically and substantively similar to the ones that have been there throughout my whole active duty time here. And I have great belief that he thinks that we're getting stronger, but he's not aware of what he's talking about. Because I've done enough training and studying independently, as well as my formal military training and my combat experience before combat deployments, everything from high intensity tank-on-tank conflict all the way through to military training, counterinsurgency, et cetera, across the board. And I can tell you that combat experience is not combat experience. You think that you know one thing, but until you actually get bloody your nose in the first fight, you don't know for sure what you know and what you don't know. And I can just tell you from personal experience, I had fought in Desert Storm in a big tank-on-tank battle. And then over time, the Iraq and the Ukraine war, the Iraq and Afghanistan war for us kicked off, and everything turned into counterinsurgency and focus on small units, et cetera. Then subsequently, I was later in my career, I got elevated up to as a major to the second in command of an armored cavalry squadron as the division cavalry for the 1st Armored Division in Europe. And so that was around the mid-2000s, a little bit later. After the war in Iraq finally started settling down and the war in Afghanistan was kind of on a low boil, then the leader said, okay, let's start focusing more on actually high-end stuff. Let's get back to our core competencies here. So I have always paid attention to this. I was always thinking it was a problem that we quit focusing on our core stuff and that we spent so much time on these smaller counterinsurgency things at the expense of our capacity to actually fight and defend ourselves against a peer or near peer adversary. So I continued to study. I continued to train. I visited World War II, World War I battlefields, Civil War battlefields in the U.S., all over the world in various different spots. I mean, almost all over Europe, from one end to that, all the way up to Stalingrad, what was Stalingrad in Russia at one point. And yet, when they made that switch, and they said, okay, now that I was literally the first unit that went through back into the Combat Maneuver Training Center in Europe, where they replicate all the aspects of an actual war in a peacetime situation where you have to have lasers, on your tanks and on your Bradleys, machine guns, individual weapons, et cetera. So, you can't go bang, bang, I got you. No, you didn't. It actually replicates if there was actually a round fired and all that kind of stuff. So it's very, very accurate in terms of battlefield dynamic. Now, you can't change the psychological machines because, if a round's coming in, it's just a report on a computer, not an actual explosion that will rattle your head, et cetera. So you can't manufacture everything, but it's best you can get in peacetime. As someone who had always paid attention and was always thinking about maneuver warfare, I still found myself, when we went back into the field for the first time as the unit, my thought process was very, very much slow, and I kept having to relearn things. I keep going, oh, shoot, yeah, I forgot about that. Oh, that's right. Yeah, this and that. And then the reaction, everything was slowed down from what I was expecting. And I was one that paid attention to those who had not been studying on their own and paying attention, or who had younger officers and enlisted guys who hadn't even had any experience of that. It was painfully slow. And we've had every opportunity in the world to train on our own, to train in garrison center before we got into that big unit situation. That's just a training situation. And I promise you that our actual combat units right now, who are doing plenty of field training, it's one thing to be going through training and to read after action reports from the Ukraine side, from the Russian side, from our intelligence, and to try to put that into effect on the battlefield. But it's a radically different thing when you experience it. Because from what, especially what I read from World Wars I and II, where there was heavy use of artillery like there is right now, you just cannot imagine the psychological impact and the blow that that has. Or when you see your friends getting blown up left and right, you have to continue to go on with the mission. None of those things can be replicated in training. And then the speed at which this action, counteraction situation keeps developing in combat, which he did speak about a little bit to his credit in this testimony. But the concept and theory is radically different than what happened. And both Ukraine and Russia have proven it, because they thought they had one level of understanding when this started, and they keep discovering how the practice is very different. And then they have to make adjustments. And then the other side adjusts to that. And then you have to add a counteraction to their action, and then vice versa. And it just never stops. And this stuff happens with light speed when you're actually in it. But it took both sides better part of a year and a half, 2 years, to finally get to the point where they could reduce that cycle of action, counteraction, et cetera. Now then, they're pretty good at it because their mind has become retooled and rewired for that speed of operations. Ours are still at ground one. We're still where they were in February 2022. Maybe you can say a few months beyond that. But because we haven't experienced it, it's just, we are so far away from thinking what we can do. So this is, I think, unsubstantiated confidence in our capacity. And he's talking about, what was the word he used? Not existential. He said, has this been a significant advance from where we were? Exponential was the word he used. He said, they were exponentially better. He believes it. I'm telling you, we're not.